which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Make sure, are we rolling and live?
Yes.
Okay.
We are streaming, we are recording, it says the sound is on.
Okay, I know I just kind of like
Fingers
flipped right
crossed.
into it, so I just
It's like
wanted to
being
be
on the
sure.
Tonight Show with no audience.
Yeah. All right, so we'll get into roll call. Commissioner Boyle,
Here.
Commissioner Oler,
Everybody's
here. Commissioner Johnson,
present.
Commissioner Sweat,
Here.
Commissioner Zaro,
Here.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Here.
and Chair Elliott, here. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to tonight's agenda?
Oops.
Going once, going twice. Okay.
Don't give me time to think.
Just want to make sure. Public participation. Hello, YouTube audience. No one present to make any comments. So with that, we will go into agenda item 5, which is approval of minutes from March 12th, 2025. Do I have a motion or any comments?
I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the
That's
minutes from
February.
March 12th, 2025. We have a second. All right, so second by Commissioner Zaro. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Then we get into our public hearing for the use table of the drive-through amendment. Would you like to introduce the topic?
Yes, so this was briefly mentioned at the last planning commission meeting. During a recent discussion with some possible development, it came to my attention that when I tracked it back, and basically when I went from the draft version to sort of the final ordinance version, the allowing drive-throughs as an accessory use in the uptown mixed use inadvertently was marked no instead of yes, or not allowed versus allowed. So this would just basically correct that inadvertent deletion.
Okay. As mentioned, we don't have anyone in the audience, but for the sake of formality, it is 6:03. I call this public meeting open. And it is 6:03. Public meeting is closed regarding PLN 2025-003 amendment. All right, let's move past. So that was the public hearing portion of it. I don't think there was any further discussion on it at all, was there? Yes, Commissioner Whalen.
Just a real quick question. There's still yet to be design standards created for drive-throughs, so it's still staff guiding things to be effective
Yes,
and,
so,
Okay.
yes, so it's on the list that when we do design guidelines, we will include drive-throughs. Because this one happens to be in the uptown, it already has some guidelines already that the other zones don't have. But yes, it is, they will come back with some, just again, some standards of helping like which direction, making sure sound and vegetation and stuff. There's some things we can do to sort of protect adjacent businesses, so.
Okay, great. And I apologize, that is actually moving right into agenda item 7A. I, for some reason, was thinking there was something else in between. So we can go ahead and introduce it, open it up for discussion as far as,
Yeah, so the hope is that
amendment.
since this is basically a correction, that if the commission is comfortable, we could make the recommendation tonight, and then it would move on to city council.
so opening it up for any questions or clarifications first. I know it was discussed last meeting. Okay, round of discussion. Would anyone like to make any comment or start? Yes, Vice Chair.
just glad to see that we are getting specific about where drive-through type of service to the public would be effective and provide a good urban streetscape type of circumstance. So, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Boyle. Was that a?
No, I just want to make sure that this, like was discussed, that this gets into more details of the codes for drive-throughs, just for an update, because, you think about it, drive-throughs have become pretty prominent in the last 20 years, and here we are just now kind of deciding, well, we do have the basics for the uptown, which is good, the direction of which way they go, where they face. Yeah, I wouldn't mind revamping this just once for a catch-up, signage, things like that.
Yeah, so we will cover later on this year when we start doing design guidelines. There are some specific issues that we've tagged that we want design standards for, as well as is there any general. So it'll come back for that. But yeah, you're correct. Being in the uptown, we already have pretty good design standards, so they have to sort of work within those, which is nice.
All right. There's no further comments. May I ask for a motion? Yes, Vice Chair Whalen.
I move to recommend to the City Council the proposed amendment to Milton Municipal Code 17.14.010, adding drive-through to the Uptown Mixed-Use Zone.
17 or 16?
I was just about to ask. 17. She said it correctly. It's written wrong. Okay. And is that a seconded? Second. Okay. Commissioner Zaro has seconded that action. Any discussion? All right, so we'll take it to vote. All those in favor of moving to recommend to the City Council the proposed amendment to Milton Municipal Code 17.14.010, adding drive-through back to the UMX zone. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes unanimous.
Thank you for that one.
7B is unit lot subdivision. We will also turn this back over to staff.
Yeah, so this is one we've talked about for a couple months now. It is one of those weird ones that it's sort of allowed, but we don't have guidelines for it, so we're trying to do guidelines. But I also want to acknowledge that as we've kind of discussed it and looked into it, there's a few more things that we keep sort of popping up that do we want to address. So I have it on here if the Planning Commission feels like they want to move and make a recommendation today. I also would understand if the Planning Commission is not ready, because like I said, there's a few things that sort of get brought up from discussion. And so it would make sense if we want to hold it off. So the main thing that came out of the previous months was this idea of how do we make sure that all of the lots are aware, and how do we deal with all the common areas? So it was discussed on whether or not we should require homeowners association. Based on my research, I'm not sure that I would recommend a formal homeowners association, because you actually have to file, and it is actually an entity. But I did recommend improved language where before it sort of just relied on easements, where this would rely on covenants, agreements that would have to be recorded. So I think if it's just a couple, if you're only got 2 or 3, I think that by doing it that way, it's more of an understanding. It's going to pop up on title reports. It's going to have very specific language of how it's paid together, whose covers what for those common things, but they don't have to necessarily go through the actual kind of incorporating an LLC, or it's not an LLC, but an HOA. So again, I don't think there's anything that would stop us requiring it for being an HOA. I just, we don't even necessarily require an HOA for bigger projects. If all it is storm, then they just have to have a storm agreement. The only time we would do an HOA is if there was common land, like a park and common streets or whatever, it becomes a city street or something. So that was that. And then as we were going through, the conversation got brought up because I was proposing a higher number than the short plats. I sent it off to the attorneys, to which he said, we had a very interesting discussion at that. There was not a unanimous decision on whether the unit lot subdivision had to match the short plat numbers or if you could have them different. But the consensus was we would be safer having the same. So that's the recommendation. Again, there's, which Councilmember Wayland pointed out, there is conflict between our definition and the actual short plat. One says you're dividing into 4, which matches RCW. The actual section talks about you're adding 1 to 4 lots from the original. So either way, like I said, I'm thinking that this is not ready to be moved on tonight. I would like direction on if we want to stay with the 4, like you were dividing 1 into 4, so the most you can get is 4, that's fine. But then let's go through and I will make sure that all the sections match that so that we're not confused. Or if you decide local jurisdictions do have the ability to raise that number as far as 9. So that's why I kind of put it, Puyallup still does 4, Edgewood does 6, Fife and Sumner does 9. The main difference is, again, it comes back to process. So the main difference in the process is with short plats, we're still notifying the neighbors, but it doesn't have a public hearing. Where if it's a full plat, it does have a public hearing and it is a little more of a process. So again, staff does not have a strong opinion on either one of those or 3 of those options, as much as whatever we decide on, I will come back making sure everything agrees. And then it just felt like there should be some sort of language on the common ownerships, because it talks about, again, it's hard. Sometimes you start getting in and you think about it too much, but common ownerships, you're not selling or leasing. I could see, so like, if you had if you've got a house and 2 ADUs, is it just, then as the common area could be 1, but theoretically you could have divided it between the driveway and the commons yards. Or I've had short plats where they really were only creating 3 or 4 lots, but then they wanted the storm. So is that a 5th or is that common so that they can still do short? So again, just feeling like there might want to be some clarifying language that says, if it's a tract and common ownership, they're not limited by the 4, if that, as the definition says, or saying, yes, even if that particular one's not for sale, it's shared common ownership, it is within the 4. So again, if it feels like since we're kind of opening this, it might be worth clarifying a few of these things.
So to clarify, the options with it would be 4 including shared lot, 4 plus shared lot, or we can make up a new number between 4 and 9.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's a good pause point to just check for, was there any other clarifications as far as what's been presented so far? And then we can start going to discussion and consensus from there.
We're going around
Yeah, if you'd like to start.
the motion. I just want to clarify.
Oh, just first going around and just asking if there's any questions or clarification so far to what's been presented.
I agree it needs to wait a little bit. Oh, I don't know. I agree. I think it needs to wait a little bit because I think the whole idea bothers me. I understand what the state is doing, but I can envision how people behave now in our society, and I don't see it getting any better. So if you go up to 9 on a lot, say,
It's not, so separate out, just to clarify,
okay,
it's still limited to what we say our limit is for housing. So the only thing, the difference between a 4 and 9 is how you process it. So if you're in the residential zone and we only allow 1 house with 2 ADUs, you're 3. This does not override that 3.
okay, so you're encompassing the larger area that
So
we do,
if-
multi.
So so what we have now, the 4 would cover the unit lot subdivision that we allow. What it would allow is if you raise that number is, let's say someone was actually doing a true short plat, like making new lots. If you could go up to 9 new lots if they had enough room.
Right.
And they meet that, the lot size and everything. again, it would just be the simpler process versus the hearing process.
Okay, my question then is, where in here does it state the limitation on the size of the lot? If you want 9 to be broken down into a parcel, where do we have the size that would allow 9?
So again, they would have to have, which again, 9's probably not even necessary for the city because we probably don't have, we hardly have anything. Well, I guess we have a few. We had one that we just did that was the 6. So again, if you go through the actual short plat's full section, which is 16.28, it says you have to meet all of the, under the conditions, you have to meet all of the, there it goes.
Requirements?
Yeah, basically all of the bulk and dimensions and all of that. So,
Building standard.
yeah, bulk and dimensional regulations set forth in chapter 17.15A and 17.15B. So it's just saying it doesn't change how many is allowed in a zone. The zoning sets that. The difference is, are we processing it as in essence, right now, if it's 4, it's a staff level with neighborhood review. If it's over 4, it's a public hearing, still with neighborhood review.
So the argument from the state on this is we're trying to move the process of housing faster with the type of plots we want to use on the short plots.
So this is the problem, is that I've opened up a can of worms. The unilot subdivision allows, their goal is to say, hey, you could sell them off on little, almost like condos as little units. So they're saying, yes, you need to allow that. In the process of doing that is where I kind of came up with, wait a minute, it seems like and you do that under the short plat process, which we already have.
Okay.
But then looking at it, there's some parts that don't agree. So then my question is, if right now it's 4, if we leave it at 4, we just need to fix the 1 or 2 areas that it doesn't sound like 4.
My other question is, how do the deeds reflect on this? In other words, we say we have a piece of property that has the main owner, and he's subdividing it down, so there'll be 2 other units, which we say can have their own power and stuff, if this power is allowed to be individual. And each one gets a deed for their unit that will clearly show common space for the entire property as part of the deed.
Yeah, so it gets filed, it gets recorded with the county, the survey gets recorded. So whether it's a short plat or whether it's a unit lot subdivision, it gets signed by everybody, it gets recorded with the county, and it lists everything on it, that these are individual, they get individual parcel numbers. This is all the common area. It'll have instructions, all the stuff we said that needs to be on that. So I guess the one question is, if we're all comfortable with just 4, because in essence, that's what it is, I didn't, and there's no great desire to increase that, then that simplifies everything.
I like 4
And we can
versus
just leave it
9.
at 4.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah, so that's good. So I will just make sure that
Yep.
that other language gets fixed and make sure there's nothing else that conflicts with that. So it says 4.
Yep.
And then the second part is, do we feel it's necessary to acknowledge, again, just because it's written weirdly, and maybe I just take that part out, but it talks about you're creating for sale. But then I'm like, and part of this came from when I looked back, it looks like there has been short plats processed in the past, like they didn't count the stormwater because it wasn't for sale. So this is where I get a little like, I'd rather it be really clear. Like, if we're creating a tract just for stormwater, which is commonly owned, is that in the 4, or can that be above the 4 because we're only selling 4? And I know that it gets a little confusing, but when it goes to me actually processing, I get a little, and I've had people argue with me about that. Well, that's not how it works. And I'm like,
Well, especially with stormwater, like for instance, we're billed twice. We're billed on the main house on the one lot, and on the other lot, we're billed separately on our stormwater fee. So you've got 3 homes on the same lot. How do you divide the storm fee up with impervious surface, impervious, and all that crap? Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. And again, this is really beyond the unit lot subdivision. This is more for traditional short plats. So let's say someone's got a big lot and they have enough to divide it into 4, plus they want, like I had one that came in, and they were only creating, I think, 3 lots. But they wanted a tract for stormwater and a tract for the street. So in essence, there's 5 different divisions of land, but 2 are common ownership. I played it safe and said, no, you got to have 4. But then I read it and I go back and forth and I look at what's been done historically. And there were times where it looked like they let them do 4 plus the storm. So then I'm like, I just feel like we should clarify, is common ownership, if common ownership needs to be within that 4, then we need to say that. Or if we're comfortable, and again, we can set it as of today. The state is fine either way. Or if we're like, no, 4 for sale, but you could have your common ownership as a tract, and we're not going to hold that against you.
And would it be okay if those are not continuous? Like you've got, a common area is a lawn here and another common area is over there. That won't be a problem under the definition that you clarify?
So that's why, yeah. And sometimes people just do it as one big tract, even though they don't touch, which is a little weird, but it's been done.
Okay.
Or
Down the road.
or you could have track A and track B. Like I said, they were wanting a track A for the road and a track B for the stormwater, and then they were going to create,
Oh,
Yeah.
the 4 lots to sell, which in essence, you're creating 6 parcels of land. Is that okay under the short plat if we add language, or do we say, nope, that's a full plat? And I know this is stretching outside of what the original topic was, so I feel like I'm confusing people or I'm adding, but it sort of came up since we're messing with this, that I sort of wanted to toss it out.
So I would say, in my mind, that 4 plus whatever common area for storms or right of way or whatever would be acceptable, because the intent is that we're trying to create 4 homes, essentially, right? So to me, that's what makes sense. If anyone else wants to kind of go down and say whether they think it should be 4 including or 4 plus for shared. Just trying to move the conversation along.
Ladies first.
Vice Chair.
So I would agree with the idea of keeping our short plat or short subdivision definition, because the plat's the map. And the division is the
definitions too, because
cutting up the land. But anyway, we use those terms interchangeably. But anyway, I support the 4. I was looking in the unit lot subdivision handout that we got in our February packet, and it provides a definition for the short subdivision from the state, which is, may I quote, the division or redivision of land into 4 or fewer lots, tracts, parcels, sites, or divisions for the purpose of sale, lease, or transfer of ownership. So I like that definition, the idea, and it could well be, I don't know, when I first started on the commission, that idea of a critical areas tract, or this idea of setting aside parts of land, I don't remember it coming up that frequently as now it's, and the way density was calculated. Years ago, it was a gross calculation, now it's net. So I would value the clarity to talk about lots that are in common ownership would not be counted for the lots, number of lots, for a short plat or short subdivision or a full subdivision. The question, a couple of questions bubble up. Are short plats common in the world of non-residential development? Because that's not really specified in the state law, and so I didn't want to make an assumption.
It can. I don't think it happens very often.
Okay.
More what you get is, which I do appreciate your clarification on binding site plans. More often than not, it's sort of the binding site plan. And actually Safeway complex is a prime example. That, and actually they've talking to me that a lot of times what they want to do is, again, they want to divide so they can, like Safeway actually owns its little parcel. And then like the section next to it is owned by the actual owner of everything else. So, but they all want to intermingle because they all want shared parking lots. They all have shared storms. So they're more apt, and they're not usually going to use like a short plat because they are tied together. So what they will use is the binding site plan that says, yes, this is, you can sell this section individually, but we still are all tied together for all of these issues. So again, it's that, it's, and most modern, most current, recent, like strip malls and a lot of those things, commercial. That's what, in essence, that's what, not Boeing, because they already had multiple parcels. We actually just simplified it down to 4 or 5. But that's, but again, they also have a lot of, they have all their agreements too. But yeah, it's not very common to do short plats for commercial or industrial. I guess it would be if for some reason somebody had a chunk that they're like, I don't want, so I might divide it off. But in most cases, that's, it's not, because with houses, you're like, you're selling off so people can buy their houses. They buy their own lots. Most times if a business, they want more land, not less.
If I may, another question. The common ownership concept, like critical areas or hazardous, well, that's a critical areas too. An access corridor or easement, utility easement,
Might be a park,
or, pardon?
might be storm, might be a park.
Right. Would there ever be something where that would be sold off? And maybe that's just food for thought later and getting things too complicated.
And that's part of
but-
this thought thing. But I think in most cases, one, it would still hold that the limit is, you know, you can't re-subdivide for X number of years either way. So if
okay.
they couldn't transfer it within, I think it's at least 5 years, that if you short plat, you can't re-short plat if it's going to put you over that, whatever's that number for sale. So for us, it would be 4. And in most cases, you're not going to be able to, because if it's wetlands, that's there's actually specific language that says if an area was wetlands, you can't like you can't cut it in half to try to then get loopholes to build things. And so,
Or to fill it in and say, well, I'll mitigate somewhere else. That is
Yeah.
the thinking I came
yeah,
across.
so there is some precautions that would protect that sort of stuff.
And the last comment is I agree with the thought that this needs a little more work before going forward. Thank you.
Continuing on with any questions, comments, or?
Yeah, it's just my understanding is we just want to make them match the short subdivision with the unit lot subdivision, and that's 4 lots for both. I think the only question is that ambiguity. What is that shared property? Is that considered a lot?
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm at too. I think it sounds like most of the groups would like to just keep it at 4, which is fine. I'll fix the language so it matches in both sections. So then the question is, I personally would like some language that acknowledges that, and again, we could make that, like, we could even say up to 2 tracks or something if we wanted to, could be in addition if it's for common ownership, such as storm critical areas. We could be real specific, we could put a little limit on it or add some language to it. But it would be nice, I think, to have that, so it just gives a little bit of buffer.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Tom, did you, sorry, not to overstep the chair.
I'll just say that I'm with the 4. I was willing, last meeting, I was leaning on 5, but I think with the 5, with the, let's call them bonus tracks for storm drainage, easements, wetlands, things like that, I mean, hey, it's open space. look at behind post office. Their open space is probably their dumpster area, but at least it's their designated space. You know what I mean? So, and they have the storm thing in the back with that, but kind of an example of how I was thinking about it is doing it that way. They're still crammed in there, but, yeah.
And they're all sold.
Yeah, like that. They couldn't build them fast enough.
It's
All right,
Milton, the attraction.
all right. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Johnson?
Michaela?
Yeah, I agree with four plus. When you say we can limit to, for example, 2 tracks, is that relevant if they can take 2 different areas and call those one tract?
Probably not, but it does at least
Makes them think.
makes them think, or at least it'd have to be the similar, like, it'd be hard to say, it'd be one thing if you're like, okay, these are our 2 open park spaces, that might be, but it'd be hard to say storm and at access and whatever are all the
That's already
same, similar things, so I think there'd be some parameters there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with 4 plus. And writing some language to limit it, as long as that, makes sense and they can't call all those things one track.
Commissioner Johnson?
The one behind the post office, are they in HOA?
Yes, they are, because they are private roads,
Right.
private stormwater, and private
Okay.
common space.
Right, because I know there's some conflict on the road between some of the homes and them.
Yeah.
The other thing is, okay, so someone says, I want to do this, but they're not going to sell the homes, they're going to go ahead and rent them. Does that have a difference?
So if they were going to rent them, they wouldn't worry about doing a binding site plan. They would just,
But maybe the person may be doing it
I mean,
so
they
in the
could.
future, in the future.
they could, and there's nothing one way or the other, but
Why has he got to be a he?
she,
You said he.
MX to you.
because she's assuming, no, I won't say that on the record.
I said he, she, they.
I mean, theoretically, because of, under our current, you could own a house and build 2 ADUs and rent them all, so either way, they could be rentals. I don't think they would go through I mean, again, they might,
Yeah.
but it's less likely they would go through the effort and not sell them.
So we'd also look that it would be an investor who would come in, build the 4 units and actually not live in one and sell all 4 units on its own. And again, for me, I look at the buyers and the way transition is to make sure things are covered, that all the responsibility stays with the 4 different owners, that if one sells to another person that's not in the original group, that it's still part of, they still have to adhere. Where is that to protect that? And then the roads, is it going to be like a common road in, or does each one have their own driveway?
They could only have one driveway in because we have to treat, if we were talking about the unit lot subdivision, because you're dealing with everything,
Right.
all of our standards for setbacks, driveways, everything has to meet as if it was one
Which we
lot.
see like on 15th.
So they have to
One
have
road.
one
Yeah.
that goes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder how many parcels we have that would be eligible. Like, would they have to merge parcels together to really do what they want to do? And I thought at one time we talked about where they didn't want individual utility boxes that, do you remember that at one time we were wondering if each one could have its
So-
own, or it had to be one? And
So so as to utilities, let's, unless there's, are we comfortable?
So I
Let's
guess
finish
just
up
quick
that.
checking for consensus. So are we okay with the idea of 4 plus with her doing more research to figure out the best way of wording that additional tracks for stormwater park, open space?
you mean 4 units, and then the rest
Yeah.
would be the property
Yeah.
common?
Okay, just checking for consensus on that so we can close that topic and then we'll
Yeah.
move into more of
Yeah.
utilities, binding site plan and kind of how that
Yeah.
works, or not binding site plan, but,
So Commissioner Whalen has a comment, but then, yeah, let's,
okay.
Just a quick comment on how you were summarizing things, and I really appreciate your keeping us on track. Thank you. Because this is a new concept, I wonder, is there going to be like a common backyard area type of a thing? I know of housing developments where there's a green belt that everybody shares, and then their property line butts up to it. It's just when you go through that concept, because my mind is, okay, a stormwater detention facility, okay, that's Medina Extreme. But if it's a shared backyard, how do people feel about that versus where we were getting real mechanical about access into the property or,
so again, if you're dealing with the unit lot subdivision, they have to meet the requirements of the zone so in the case of single family, they have to have a 25-foot setback. So everyone's got that. So there's going to be a 20-foot yard setback, which will be possibly, they could do it as common. They could also just divide it in half and say you get half and you get half. But
There's no one way.
yeah, but it does definitely, everyone will get yard,
okay.
however you do that, because there'll be the 20 in the front, the 25 in the back, and the 7.5 on each side. So yeah, so that part stays the same. And then if you're doing an actual short plat, again, it's hard because it's different concepts. If you're doing an actual short plat to create new lots, well, then each individual lot has to meet those. They have to be 8,000 square feet. They have to have a 25-foot backyard, 20-foot front yard. So either way, people are going to have that versus, and if you're a multifamily, then you have to meet those setbacks. And those we do, I think we'll work on making multifamily. When we get to design standards, we could look at some of that for them as well.
Okay. And so there could be a lot, I'm thinking of the day we make biscuits, little plugs are cut out, little biscuits are cut out, and then one lot would have all these holes in it.
So
It could be that way.
Theoretically have 3 holes in it, and then everything else is shared. But then you have your agreement that says how it works. And like anything, if you have neighbor disputes, you have neighbor disputes. So
Okay.
I have that right now with traditional lots.
It's like the backyardigans.
So, all right.
So
So
thank you for
Okay.
just the clarification on that topic of
Okay.
number of lots for a unit lot subdivision.
All right,
So-
so we kind of got into a consensus of 4, plus the idea of something for utilities if necessary or needed, not required, but if necessary. And then we're kind of getting into more of the nitty gritty of like how access works, kind of just our general questions on
So, yeah, just a
how
couple.
deeds work and,
Yeah, so a
Okay.
couple things to follow up on. So on page 12,
I look at my 12.
I thought I added, I'm a little confused here. I feel like there should be another page, but, so on page 12, it talks about that I added this idea of, that joint use agreements and maintenance agreements identifying the rights and responsibilities of property owners and any homeowners association shall be executed for use and maintenance for the common areas, and it shall be recorded with the county. I thought it was in the memo, but maybe it was in the email that I sent out, because my memo says it was only 1 page. Is if we would like, there was, again, language that I thought I sent to everybody, but I'm not seeing it here, that basically was a little bit, literally listed, instead of saying agreement, maintenance agreements, joint use agreements, it said covenants. Basically, it mimicked the language that homeowners association use. So I'm thinking I will put that language in because I think it's stronger language, and I think that more addresses what I'm hearing from the planning commission is, make sure they don't just, oh, well, here's a half a page agreement, that it really is the covenants that they record that says how everything's being used.
You're talking about page 17 go down to 1630.030C, I think is what you were just talking
Access
about.
easements, joint use and maintenance agreements, covenants, yeah.
The CCRs.
Declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's what the binding site plan language is. I will, we can put similar strong language. It's a little softer in the unit lot subdivision, so it just says joint use and maintenance agreements, so we'll use that harder language in both.
Okay.
And then you were talking about utilities, and I did want to, interesting, because we're all having to do this, I have discussion with other planners. And so we actually had a meeting that city planners were asking other city planners, how are you handling this? What are you doing? What are you thinking? And so I did, let's see, let me find the right page. Because it deals with. All right, so on page 15, and again, maybe that's not exactly the right term, but basically, there was discussion of the separate utility meters, and Tacoma, I was talking to a Tacoma planner that I have a really good relationship with, and she says, yes, they normally require, and I think there was another city that popped in saying, and they did that very similar, that they require separate utility meters unless there is an agreement that outlines how those utilities are going to be shared. So I think the preference, I mean, the preference would probably be separate utilities, but if it was one that was, is an older one that already had shared utilities and now later they want to divide, it might be worth having the option of a utility agreement. Or do we want to leave in that they have to have separate utility meters before they sell? Either.
And you're only talking the utility meters and such, not that they can't have like a shared storm sewer, because those are considered utilities as
Right.
well.
Specifically
Yes.
utilities.
So yeah, it would be water, basically it'd be water and electric.
Mhm.
So that they'd have their own. The
Their own
advantage is
meter.
that way they all have their own bills, and if whoever gets the main one doesn't pay it, not everyone gets shut off. That's
Yeah.
why Tacoma Power basically requires individual units when they can for that reason.
Yeah.
So
Quick story along these lines, current events. I got a development up in this area and their individual lots, there's only 2 completed and like 2 of the, looky-loo lots that are finished, but nobody's really using. So there's a community septic system. So there's only really 2 houses feeding this current system, and it has blowers and pumps and all these things. And I was out there, we were starting to do one of the lots, and the guy developer has not paid his bills very well. And so now we're back, we've been paid. And I go out there and I'm like, you guys hear any blowers going? They're like, no. I go over and look at the panels, all the green lights are off. And I'm like, well, there's power to this meter, there's power to those 2 houses. So I go, I gotta call the electrician, all the breakers are on. He comes out the next day and it's like, yeah, somebody shut this power off. So the developer was because there's no HOA yet. So the bill for that goes to the developer and he didn't pay the bill. And so here's these people actively using this system that needs to have processing and all this and pumps going. And so yeah, it's still not on. I don't know. I told him, you might want to pay your bill, dude. But the importance of, I think, individual bills and meters is why they do it. Otherwise, you would have your whole street. Why wouldn't you just have your street split it, or something like that? So I think individual meters is important. Sorry for the long story, just
No,
a
you're good.
work story I wanted to share.
Well, also a personal
Commissioner
one then.
Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah, also, when we look at some subdivisions that are for seniors, they will have 1 meter for water and stuff, and it's spread among all the other people. Well, one person may not use as much water as the one main person who's watering the yard and everything. The other question, so that why each individual meter shows that each unit is an individual unit and not owned by one person. The other thing is when we're looking at utilities, is it only electric? Is gas going to be allowed? You said water and electric, but there is gas in Milton, so how is that determined ahead by the developer that each house is going to be with gas? Because we know what PSC is doing right now because of the state. But, you know, we've got to change now. We're getting different power coming back. No.
Well, and that's why you just sort of say utility meters and it covers whatever they choose to hook up.
I
So
think it's, yeah.
what I'm hearing is let's require utility meters.
Yeah, anyone who's dealt with a bad roommate or, yeah.
Yeah. No, and from past lives, there were poor triplexes where one person was supposed to pay and they didn't pay and
Yeah.
everybody gets it turned off. So,
Yeah.
all right, I will make sure that's done. So that's all the things I had.
Okay. All right, so just kind of open discussion as far as everyone that's read through it. Was there anything else that caught your eye or questions or things that, what is it, wonderings?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll go vice chair first. Go ahead.
Is there a value that was discussed at the planners meeting that you mentioned, discussing limiting the size or either to the max or to the, like, you couldn't make a unit lot subdivision any smaller than, I thought I read something in Seattle that was you couldn't go less than 1,000 square feet. But I just put that out there as a, and it was briefly mentioned in that fact sheet from Department of Commerce. And it mentioned that some cities have guardrails. Everett requires unit lots to be large enough to contain a dwelling unit and accessory improvements such as decks, fences, driveways, parking, and private yard areas. So the City of Spokane allows a unit lot to be as small as the footprint of the building situated upon it, subject to the requirements of the building and fire code. So it sounds like it can be just where your foundation connects with the ground, or planning for something that's got a little more
Yeah, you
livability.
require a buffer around it, like it must be at least 3 feet.
Yeah. So I didn't see anything like that in the code. I tend to favor the idea of saying you got to make it big enough to have a yard, but I haven't looked at Everett's code to say, well, the yard's got to be big enough for a dog and a wading pool. I mean, it gets kind of detailed, and I just put it out there as a point of discussion from the perspective of maybe we visit this again in a year or something to see how things are
Even-
working out.
And if anyone even does it.
Yeah. So that was one question that had come up. Another question that had come up was relative to access requirements and frontage improvements, because currently it's all based on the short plat quantity of lots. And thinking about residential zones that allow 12 dwelling units per acre, or in the example of the town center, 20 dwelling units per acre. I just wonder, gee, should we really think through the idea of frontage
don't-
requirements?
I don't think we can do frontage requirements for ADUs. We can do them we do them for basically your first house. So if it's a single family house or a duplex, we require frontage requirements. You can't do it for ADUs. If you're for the first time multifamily, anything new is going to require it.
Okay, so.
Any new commercial, residential, anything new, we require it.
Okay, so frontage requirements, access requirements, street improvement requirements, that's all based on the quantity of lots, meaning the parent lot. And my question is there a threshold where someone in the building world would say, you kind of need a wider access corridor there because yes, it's serving one parent lot, but you had the land area to make, for example, 12 unit lots. So it's just something to mull on, other people having thoughts about that.
So
It's just,
again, if you do if you're doing a short plat or full plat, our current code requires you to do street and or frontage improvements. We are fine tuning that outside of the planning commission role in that we are working with Gray and Osborne, our engineers, to update the public works standards. So we're actually looking at making sure that that language is clear and we're all up to date on all of those things. So again, yeah, so right now, if you have a lot and you have a house on it and you divide a section off to sell, you have to do frontage on the part you're selling. You don't have to do it in front of the part that you already own or that already has the house. If you're taking a lot that's, completely empty and you're dividing up, you have to do frontage. So that's kind of the way our current frontage stuff works. And
Is it frontage in lieu of traffic impact, or is it?
No, both.
Both? Okay.
So yeah, and right now you do have to pay 50% of the traffic impact if you add an ADU. So you're still getting traffic impact. You're just not requiring frontage.
Yeah. Commissioner Boyle?
Oh, thank you. So not to rehash something too much and not to skip over what the vice chair was talking about, but I've had this in my head, is as far as frontage improvements, and this may be for another discussion as well, is these developers, the city having them pay the in lieu of fee instead of actually doing the frontage improvements. I would like to look that over and see if we can just get rid of it.
Or 1.5?
How are we going to hold the city responsible for the sidewalks that they promise us? And it's the goal that we've all had at any community outreach that we've done has always been public safety and people having sidewalks. If we're having these, all they're doing is right here. Okay, let's take this development here, was done 15 years ago. They pay the in lieu of fee. I brought it up. Why are they paying the in lieu of fee? Well, we put it in an account and then we use that in areas to connect other areas. And I go, really? So you're taking something that would have been a public safety improvement, and now you've created a gravel area along 10th, and people are parking there. Where are the kids getting to the bus? How are these people getting around? Now, when there's vehicles parked there and there's no sidewalks. So I'd like to see that just gotten rid of.
So I wouldn't, staff's recommendation wouldn't be to completely get rid of it. Like I said, we are reviewing it as part of the Public Works Standards Review and the Streets Standard Review. Because there are places, like we have a new development that's going in, like they're putting in a couple houses where Comet dead ends on next to I-5 off of Fifth Ave. And it's all developed around it. If we had him put in sidewalks, there would be it would just be this little chunk of sidewalks, and then you'd hear like, well, the city's making him do sidewalks to nowhere. So instead, we have made him pay the in lieu of, which has paid for the sidewalks that we've put on 19th this last year. And we are, hopefully, if we can get certain property owners to agree, we should, in the next year or two, have 23rd from one end all the way to the other. So there are times when in lieu of makes sense for some of these little isolated areas to use in places where we have more main traffic of pedestrians to kind of connect everything. I do think, like I said, it's more under the Public Works and they're working through that. We are looking at some of the language because some of the language actually lets like a property owner decide. And we felt like it shouldn't be the property owner who decides if they pay in lieu of, it should be the city who decides if they pay in lieu of. So we are looking at it from that perspective. So I will pass on your thoughts to make sure that we do have wording, like because like I said, under the current staffing, I can't imagine we wouldn't have made them put sidewalks, but obviously a different staff didn't make them. So I will pass on the concerns to see how we can, what wording we have to try to make sure that some of the more central streets get them.
I don't mean my street.
Well, and again, there are
I
The
just
way
like
of saying,
using,
like, I remember on our traffic that there was like arterials or certain types
Yeah.
that you would basically say if a road is a
Yeah,
dead end
and-
side street,
And
it's
I'm sure
okay.
that
this one, you've got 10
Yeah.
houses, and this
Yeah.
may not be a busy street, but
It's cut
it's a
through
well-used
a lot.
street, and
well, and we do
maybe-
have, I mean, they did end up putting sidewalk down to the trail, so yeah, it probably, again, it's probably,
Yeah, and
in
most
the-
of that was probably grant money.
yeah, so the traffic, my guess is the transportation improvement plan probably identifies our priority streets.
I think
So-
if you look at the city's budget for streets and streets improvements, and you see some of the sidewalks that have been put in this city in the last 10 to 15 years, it was grant money. It's gotta be just a very small percentage that the actual city contracts out to go and put sidewalks in a specific area. It's gotta be minimal.
And I would
Seen the
say
streets
in the
budget.
last 2 years with your new staff, we've probably done a lot. So I will pass those numbers on to you.
Grant work is amazing.
No, but a
Everyone-
lot of ours is from traffic budgets that we have. So I will see if we can get you those numbers.
Continuing on, yes, Commissioner Johnson.
You know, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I just find this whole thing with this unit lot subdivisions stupid. Because we have things in the neighborhoods that are already doing the same thing, which we had to do with ADUs, you know, spread things out. And so I'm still trying to understand the full purpose that the state has done for this city to have to accept unit lot subdivision. And I thought it was so it could speed up the process of permitting.
So unit lot subdivision is to increase ownership of those houses.
But it doesn't mean it will, because nothing says you have to be the owner.
No, but
It can be rentals.
it could be.
It's not home ownership, it's housing.
Okay.
And that's the 200,000 housing units they think they're gonna bring it. No, I'm sorry. I'm really angry with the time that has to be wasted on redefining
Short plat.
short plats.
Okay.
And it's
some of
not
this
you,
was-
it's
well,
just the
and some
whole
of it is,
thing.
but some of it is me. Some of it got off on me finding things or trying to clarify things. The whole point of unit swap, I mean, we are allowing 3 units per property as is. As it is, there's no way to sell them. They have to be rentals. They have to be rentals as it is right now.
Like for an ADU, you mean?
For an ADU. So the idea of a unit lot, I mean, the primary use of a unit lot subdivision is to take those 3 units and make them so you could sell them to provide ownership. That's the point behind that.
Right.
So, and theoretically, if someone came in tomorrow, I would have to do it, even though I don't have the guidelines that I want. So,
Because of the state.
yeah, because it was part of the I think, or it was part of something that all of us didn't quite focus in on as we were trying to get our comp plan and then went, oh, shoot, I got to put some guardrails around this. I'd like to put some guardrails around it.
I
Um,
did,
we haven't heard from Commissioner Zaro for a while, so I just want to make sure you have, okay.
Good, thank you.
Just wanting to make sure we give opportunity. Commissioner Sweat?
Just so I am sure that I understand this, and I'm afraid I agree with you, this is stupid. And it's gonna open up a can of worms like you guys have never seen, I'll guarantee it. Yes, everybody should have their own meters for utilities, absolutely. When you say frontage, what all is involved in the frontage of the primary residence?
Curb, gutter, sidewalk,
Yep,
and not a rolled curb.
right,
Say that again?
Curb, gutter, sidewalk.
yeah.
Okay,
And occasionally planter strips.
okay,
Yeah.
now,
Thank
these 3 extra houses you're putting on your lot, they're gonna be required to have a driveway, right?
So again, the ADU, the unit lot subdivision only applies in essence to the ADUs that we've created. So you're talking about 1 house and 2 ADUs. They all have to have a shared driveway. They all have to be within the standard setbacks. And so that's the idea being that your condominium, it allows them to basically condo the house with a little bit of property or chunks of property versus having them be rentals. So that's the unit lot subdivision part. Because they're using they are using the short plat process, it sort of makes it convoluted. So again, it provides ownership instead of rentals. That's the whole point.
So-
But either way, it is what it is.
Yeah, just to give you guys an idea, if you check Redfin or Zillow or any of those, I think I checked a week or two ago, and in the entire city of Milton, there was 12 parcels for sale, period. 2 of them were houses over $1 million. 3 of them were like that strip on the Comet where they're getting permits to build houses, and they're basically selling the lots with, hey, we have permits coming so that you can use our builder. And then I think 2 of them were over $1 million parcels. And that left like 5 houses left that ranged from 350, I think 3 in Heather Hills that were somewhat affordable, and I think 1 house that was in that $500,000 to $700,000 range. If you're 25 to 35, how many 25 to 35-year-olds or 40-year-olds are able to buy a house
My point.
Not me.
over $700,000?
I say we solve the problem. If part of it is we have to have affordable housing, and that's the goal. In Virginia, I was raised in townhouses.
Yeah.
Why don't we say these are only for townhouses, that you have a front yard, you have a backyard, and it's affordable housing? Single-family homes on these are not going to allow a lot of people. What will happen is you'll have investors coming in and buying them and renting them out. That's my concern, because it's happening with the single-family homes now. So can we say our design for these are not apartments, we're talking,
So
not
again,
duplexes.
The unit lot subdivision is primarily for ADUs. ADU rules are already set. So this is just how you convert them. In our multifamily zones, yes, you can use the binding site plan to do townhomes or something like it. And we have, in essence, I mean, right now, I think they're going to rent them, but they could. There's a townhome stretch going in over there. So, but at this point,
It's a done deal.
while I appreciate the discussion, we are limited by the guidelines of the state, and I think we're within that, and I'm not sure we can add anything else to it.
Well said.
Yes, or Vice Chair.
Was Commissioner Oler
I'm
finished?
happy that we've got the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. That was what I was after when I even brought up HOAs. Not because I wanted HOAs, I do not, but I wanted everybody to have really clear guidelines on who owns what, since we got to do this anyway. And if there's any dispute, if you have your neighbor not paying their bills or whatever, it won't hurt you. That's what that was about. So, yeah.
Vice Chair.
So a couple of smaller topics. Looking on page 14, applicability. The language currently provided says that the provisions of this chapter, et cetera, can be used to develop middle housing, ADUs, and multiple detached single-family residence. I looked for a definition for middle housing. I couldn't find it in Title 17, which is where I assume it would be. Like, that area defines duplexes and multifamily. So, because in reading some other cities, they were very specific about not all middle housing was allowed to use it. They named a few types of middle housing. So that's what piqued my curiosity about how, do we want it to apply to all middle housing because this is going to apply in the NR2 zone, the urban residential, multifamily. I mean, there's going to be interest, I'm sure, beyond just the single-family zone. So I don't think we have any provisions yet for middle housing. Did I miss that one?
The only thing we are required for middle housing specifically is middle housing is considered kind of duplexes through maybe quadplexes or garden apartments or whatever. So the only thing we're required to allow in our single family is duplexes. But we do allow in our multifamily, you could have a triplex or a quadplex or something. And so you could use this process up to 4, because we're only going to allow 4 if it had it. But,
So I just put that as a food for thought, because I saw some cities being very specific about, like I mentioned, cottage housing. They listed specific things. I didn't do enough studying to see if they were specifying in particular zones. And here you were mentioning, well, you're not allowed to do certain things in the NR1 zone. So it's just something else to think through a bit. And I won't go forward until I see you're done reading, Manager Stallnaker.
If it might make more sense to say provisions of this chapter shall apply to parcels that are developed for residential use in which no dwelling unit are stacked on another dwelling unit.
my assumption is that I pulled that language. Though, yes, we don't have middle housing definition, but it's sort of right now out there.
It's on page 13 too of unit lot subdivision definition.
Yeah, so I'm suspicious, I'm suspect that I pulled it as the state's definition of it, or at least the Commerce Guidelines definition of it, but I can look at that and, yeah, we could definitely say it's for, well, it does say, I mean, it does say it's housing, dwelling units, and, so it definitely is clear that it's residential.
Yeah, the reason why I was kind of thinking, I was restating for residential use in which no dwelling units are stacked on top of, on another dwelling unit was because, I mean, how many different terms have we come up with just in the last 5 years since I've been on planning commission? So, we've seen it go from granny flats to accessory apartments to ADUs so trying to always keep up on that term versus just saying residential use in which no dwelling units are stacked.
Okay.
If everyone's okay with that
Could you
idea.
clarify that? Because I've seen in rules that middle housing can have side-by-side units or can have stacked units. And then what I've seen was mostly this not allowing it to be stacked on another use.
Well, this is specific to unit lot subdivision applicability. So with the applicability here, it's that you can't subplat or subdivide a stacked. So you can't say first level belongs to this person, second level belongs to this person, and third. It's
Yeah,
saying you have to have.
The unit lot subdivision only doesn't work from vertical, it only
Yeah.
Round up,
works
okay.
from
Yeah.
horizontal.
So it's, okay, or a use. So if you had a business like mixed-use building, unit lot subdivision would not be applicable.
Correct.
Okay. So my question was just the definition
Yeah.
of what middle housing is. And I didn't see one in the zoning code. Someone help me and correct me
It
if I was
looks
wrong.
like it's in RCW,
No.
Growth Management Act.
We can at a future date add a definition for middle housing in the zoning in Title 17, or I could replace middle housing, like you said, with some sort of
Yeah.
more residential.
Okay. And I wanted to confirm process type 3 that's listed in section 1625.020. Process type 3, is that also the way short plats?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's staff level with a notice of 500 feet and notice of the property.
Okay. And the other thing in trying to think, this to me is like Russian dolls nesting in one another to try to get it all sorted out. And I respect the folks who can really keep all of this straight in their head. But I wanted to make sure I understood that the new code we created had a table specific for dimension standards and a table specific for building bulk regulations. And unit lot development, you can ignore for the unit lot, the dimension standards.
Yeah, so the parent lot had to meet all of
The parent lot has to meet the
setbacks and all of that, but then they can be abutted within the
Yeah.
parent lot.
So the idea being that, yeah, so if the parent, I mean, it has to meet the parent, you know, when you draw a box around whatever those units are, it has to meet the dimensions of setbacks, impervious coverage, structure coverage, all of that. So when you add them all together and draw a little line around, it has to meet all those. And then if it's a primary house, it has to meet all of our bulk regulations and design regulations for a house. If they're ADUs, it has to meet it for ADUs.
Okay, because I was looking at the bulk table versus because they used to be commingled and so forth, and really, could you just take another look at those two tables and just make sure that with the language in the code, as I understand it, the dimensional regulations don't apply to unit lot development? And I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something in the dimension table that they had to abide by, but unit lot development does have to abide by the bulk table.
So
That's where I get tripped up.
Yeah, so
What's-
the development as a whole on the parent lot this is the criteria, meets the applicable dimensional and bulk building regulations. So as a whole, it has to meet the setbacks, it has to meet the coverages, all of that. And then each individual home would have to meet, like I said, if it's a single family or duplex, it has to meet those. If they're ADUs, it has to meet the ADU section, so. which
So
are-
they have to abide by the building height,
Mhm.
the total structure coverage,
Yep, yep.
each little one. And I thought that that was not how it was done, that
It's
each
just-
little one is aggregated together and as a whole. It's treated as a whole entity. So we can talk about that later,
Yeah.
but that's the gist or the theme of the question,
Yep,
is reviewing the standards.
yep. I
The two
will
tables.
verify and make sure that yeah. I mean, that's the intent and I think it's
Yeah.
there, but I will double check.
Because there may be a value in being specific about what is required for the unit lot development to meet. The other question is I was looking for information about impact fees. I know we had something in the code presented about parking and how to count the unit for certain things. So is there
Yeah.
something, did I miss it in here? I might
So
have.
again, unit lot subdivision is simply taking what's there and making them sellable. If you actually go to the ADU section, it says that so the first house would be at the full single-family impact fee level. And then our ADU section says each ADU would be at 50% of impact. So they're paying 50% of parks, 50% of traffic, 50% of schools. And we're doing that now. So they're going to pay the impact fees when they get built. Like I said, the ADUs are at 50%, the first house is at the full amount.
Okay, and then the applicability says multiple detached, single-family residences. So
If
are
it's
they going to
allowed-
pay the full?
If it's allowed by the zone. If you did a duplex, you're paying, I believe each unit is paying the full amount, so yeah.
Okay, so the ADU gets the reduced fee, but if a single-family home is built on a unit lot subdivision parcel, they pay the full
Yeah,
impact
and
fee,
again,
correct?
we don't currently, I don't think we currently allow that. I mean, like I said, it would have to, we allow again, so it's like you always have to kind of go back to what does the zoning allow, and then this allows you how you want to separate it out.
Okay.
But right now, we only allow a single family with 2 ADUs, duplex with 1 ADU. We don't allow, so they have to hit that ADU mark of 1,000. So if they get, we wouldn't allow anything bigger than 1,000 because that would be a single family, and we don't allow more than 1 single family. So they all sort of
That's how it's covered.
Yeah.
What about in other zones? Like where density is calculated
So in our multifamily zones,
differently?
So like I said, we did the binding site plan, did allow sort of these single, because it allowed, so I suppose if it was in that way, you might be able to, but once you get over 4, you would get kicked into the binding site plan category. So, that's what they did they still had to, like, the house, the size of it has to meet that zone. So you're looking at that zone, what is the density?
Okay, so and we can talk more about it later, but that was the other
Yeah,
question.
nothing in these override the densities or the housing limits. Nothing in this overrides those.
Okay, and I want to make sure others get to speak as well, so I'll stop there.
Commissioner Boyle, you had your hand up.
And about impact, speaking of impact fees, I had 2 things. Impact fees, now that we're allowing more ADUs on a property, do we want to remove that discount impact fee that we're giving these people when they're creating such high impacts on such small lots? I don't know, if you guys still think it stands, I see a single-family home as a single-family home. And so they should abide by the same fees that any new builder would
So-
put into place.
I will toss out that the city council has talked about, staff has mentioned and city council has talked about, because in essence, they set the impact fees, about maybe doing some kind of a new study on impact fees, to see if we're where we still want to be, because we have to justify them. There's also a trend looking at, instead of just saying single family or ADU or apartments, is looking at bedrooms. That, if you have a structure with 1 bedroom, it's got a lot, right now we're charging for, you could have a 2-bedroom house that's got the same impact fees as a 6-bedroom house, where you can put a lot more people in a 6-bedroom house, with more cars and more whatever. So, so there is the council as a, like I said, we have mentioned to council, and we have had discussions at staff that I think we'll probably in the next year or 2 be doing just an overall impact fee study with a consultant to see where we should be and how we want to, and some of the council members want to get rid of the impact fees because they do add pricing. You're talking up to $10,000 you're adding per house by impact fees, which is a lot of money if you're trying to build housing. So again, it's all over the place.
Just
That's-
something I wanted to just make sure the commissioners were comfortable with, giving the 50% on the ADUs and also now the unit lots as well. Will also, right?
Well,
Aren't the unit lots getting, so if you build the
So-
parent lot, you're paying the impact fees for that house. Then you build 3 smaller houses,
so
or
when you build those, it
presumably
would
to-
fall under you can do unit lot at any time. So the impact fees are at the time of the building of the structure. So really this section doesn't deal with the impact fees. It's when you build the structures that it deals with those. And it's actually not in title, the 50% off is in Title 17, but the actual impact fees is not, that is set by council under the whole different section, so.
And they don't, council has to actually hire a consultant versus just looking at what other cities our size impact fees are and what their roads are like and asking questions and doing
So,
some research. We
In
hire,
order to have impact fees, and I will say this is getting off the topic of
No
tonight.
way,
so
dude.
Feel free for the chair. You have to justify, so impact fees are very specific what you can use them for. You can't use them for maintenance. You have to use them to, like, if for schools is the easiest, like, hey, we're getting more people, so we're gonna have to build another school. Impact fees can go towards building that new school. When you're dealing with traffic impact fees, we're not necessarily building any more roads. We can't use it to maintain our roads. So what are we using them for? Now, we are using them for, you can use them for multimodal. So ideas that we can use them towards sidewalks, bicycle routes, that kind of stuff. With parks, we're not building any more parks, but we're taking park impact fees. So, but there are ways that we can say, yes, but you can't use it for maintenance, but you can use it for certain improvements. So if we're adding a use to a park, you can use those. So you have to, so yes, so in most cases, it's not just like, oh, well, they're charging this much. You have to justify, why are we charging this? In essence, it's a tax on new houses. Why are we charging this? And so you have to show that subdivision, that new house, that we are having to build more something for it, and then you have to figure out what that cost is. So yeah, in essence, it'll take a study to justify what we're doing and why we're collecting it.
Instead of just
Not as easy as,
infrastructure.
so it's not as easy as I thought.
It's just impact fees for
Last thing,
infrastructure.
maybe next time we do something like this, I know you had the little printouts with the unit lots on it with the ADUs, and we have such a broad spectrum of between 4 and 9 and 3 ADUs and this, some examples of the extreme of what the worst it could, in my opinion, the worst it could look like, and then what the most presentable would look like, and, you know, kind of where we sit now.
You'd like some graphics brought back.
A little bit, yeah, just because I think it's important, especially when we're having a public hearing, that people understand visually what we're talking about, especially when all of us are even asking unit lot questions, unit lot subdivision, unit lot this. Maybe a few more pictures would especially help the public, but it would help me too. I like it. And you do good pictures. You do. That's all I had. Thank you. I support this. You get this other stuff wrote up, and I'm ready.
Why don't we say last round for comments, questions? Lazaro, Vice Chair.
Just a couple things to add on. I understand the reduction of impact fees was prompted by trying to make the housing more affordable, but the costs are the costs. I don't think it's particularly fair. So I support the idea of prorating or number of bedrooms. It's just food for thought. I mean, the cost is the cost, and to put it on someone else isn't particularly fair when you're causing the impact. The other thing is, my assumption is that we could end up with some pretty surprising things with a mix of housing types, but to really get into discussing anything along those lines of trying to tame, the contrast of a single-family home and then a very big townhome setup somewhere. And this applies throughout residential areas. It's not just our NR1, but that kind of a concept is set aside for design standards or something of that nature, correct? And again, this question's prompted by looking at the example of a house in this handout. It was like, ooh, something to think about.
And I will point out that a huge chunk of the jurisdictions, the larger jurisdictions have to allow up to like true middle housing, which means that like Tacoma has to allow 6 plexes in their single family. We don't have to allow anything other than a duplex and in an ADU or a house in ADU. So most of those things don't apply to Milton.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I look forward to the rewrite and talking with you later. Thank you.
All right, going once, going twice. All right. So I think, as we said, for homework there, staff is going to do some revisions, edits, and come back to us next meeting.
And I will look through the other fun topics that we have on the agenda and bring at least one of those back to start moving forward, because I think hopefully this one's about wrapped up. And so some of those, like I said, design, landscaping, parking, all of those are triggered to come back. So I'll take a look and see which one I feel most comfortable with, bringing that back next meeting to start working on that.
All right, so with that, I think we take it to staff reports.
Trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, we've had some, it's definitely spring, so a lot more conversations with people building, wanting to build, wanting to add on, what can we do? So that's been kind of fun, but also means I've been busy. I have pictures of my trip if anyone wants to see them after the meeting. And we have another interview for a building inspector on Friday, so happy thoughts for me that maybe it'll be a good fit. I really think it would be valuable for the city to have our own pre-polls. So other than that, I think we're doing pretty good. And if we get some, I can share, which it's been in the, I think the packet that went out, but the Gravity Coffee that's in front next to the post office that went out is appears to be going to be a drive-up pizza place. So like oven, yeah. So I don't know if it's like you call ahead or if
Good
it's,
about it.
or if it's by the slice, but yes.
Yeah, it
they're-
was almost like, is that a Papa Murphy's drive-through
Yeah,
sort
no,
of
it's
style, or
a,
is it?
I can never say it right. It's a
Pagliacci?
brick oven pizza.
Yeah, because if you get those hot enough, they just go in
Yeah.
and then they come out.
Yeah.
Because I was
Oh.
wondering, I'll be
like,
sitting
how are
there
they gonna
like,
fit
watching
there?
traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, I don't know if it's like you order ahead and pick up or you
Yeah.
just pick up a slice or both, but anyway, it's kind of different. I thought it sounded kind of cool.
Well, they also have trucks. The
Yeah.
company is what I saw
Oh,
in the
okay.
news.
Don't they go up to Acorn?
Yeah, so anyway, so that should be hopefully coming soon. We're getting a UPS store if you hadn't heard that.
Again?
Yes,
It's back.
it's back,
Yeah, next
UPS.
to the vet.
Hopefully the car wash is getting done soon, the one up on Emerald, so.
Rabbit, anything.
Wet Rabbit requested another extension.
Okay.
I think, I don't know.
They'll probably do something else.
Well, I get, yeah. I think they changed or something changed, so I think they've been trying to sell it to somebody else. And
Okay.
anyway, I get a couple of these that never go anywhere. So that's the fun stuff.
All right. Commissioner reports. Yes, Commissioner Sweat.
My term on this commission is up next month.
Oh,
So, and I've decided not to re-up. And so next month will be my last meeting.
okay.
And I'm staying on the Civil Service Board, and I'll probably keep doing that for as long as I can. But I appreciate all the help. Thanks for working things out so I could hear. It was a struggle for the first year and a half. So, but thanks for, it's been quite an experience. That's all.
He wants a severance check. what he
Yeah.
said.
Or Vice Chair Whalen.
Well, in case I don't see you next month, I just want to say thank you for your level-headedness and the opportunity to just get your perspective and giving so much to the city to help us have a well-rounded vision and code to implement that vision. So thank you for your service. I don't have anything to report otherwise tonight.
Yeah, I'd also like to just thank you for your service. I do appreciate your perspective and how you're able to kind of, when we start rambling, go, wait, hold on, time out.
Yeah.
What are we saying? And really get through to the heart of, I think you're really great at summing that up real quick and then saying, okay, here's my opinion. I'm ready to move forward. So I appreciate that from you, and I look forward to continuing to see you throughout the city.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zara?
I have nothing, thank you.
Milton Days is August 16th. I'm hoping the city will do another booth and to see all of you there, at least stop by and visit, watch the parade, and And the stage, I don't know if that new stage is gonna be ready.
We'll get you up there when we're
But, you know,
together.
the city people, always like to have you come up and get back there and, chat with the citizens. And so they can take a break and, you know, they usually have free popsicles and stuff. And it's a good time to interact with people. And even if you're just shaking hands and saying hi to your neighbors, it's a fun experience. You brought up the car wash. I'm glad to see that development finally cleared their stormwater pond and did some maintenance on that area. It looked terrible. I hope there's some kind of covenant for that, because those are important. And Al, Commissioner Sweat, I was like, who's quitting? And he just put his head down like this and he says, but I'm gonna finish my term, and it's very respectable of you. Thank you for your service. And also, like they said, you know, it's basically, for Milton, it's almost groundbreaking to have someone get an actual hearing impaired system put in here, you know? And so I commend you on that and holding your ground and on that. I appreciate that. And then I don't know if this is offensive but it's looked like I'm gonna be the only dude here, maybe possibly. There's a 50-50 chance, so thanks a lot, Al, for your service.
Oh, are you done?
Oh, my rebuttal.
The reality is you can't leave unless you find a male replacement. Anyway, I'll be here next month and I'll say my goodbyes then. I don't like it, but it is hard when you have more than one commission or board to do as a citizen. And that's why we need more to volunteer to spread it out, because it takes, if you're doing your research, it's a lot of commitment and people don't realize it. But it's been fun with you, but I'll see you next month. Find the mail. Or we could become what's the female version?
A hen party?
You better just, you're taking a lot of heat off of me, but
All right,
let's
it
just.
is, next meeting is May 14th